Kia ora tātou. Just as our opening, just want to acknowledge the purpose of the karakia is to recognise Margaret's role as chair of this committee, and we recognise her passing. So with absolute respect, we give karakia and acknowledgement to her and for the blessing of our meeting today. Nō reira mi no tātou. He honore, he kore, he mangārongo ki te mata o te whenua he whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. E te atua runga rawa, tēnei mātou kia whakamoe miti, kia whakawhetati kia koe, mauri o manakitanga, he arasaki, he tiaki, he whakawhanake ake tō tātou nei whiri wānanga e pāna ki te taio. O tira, ko te mea nui ko ngā tangata, o tira, ko te mea nui, ko te wairua o tīna o tātou. Whakatongia tō wairua tapu he awhina, hei tohu, e mātou i tēnei hui, ko hui karaiti hoki tō mātou ariki. Amen.
Amen.
And just in translation, I just sought acknowledgements to our leader, and God bless us and give us strength, love and harmony in our meeting today. Yeah. Ka pai. And appropriately, we're going to sing Whakaria Mai, and the words are on your piece of paper, but I know that Joe is really good at this song too. Oh, it's up to tea.
Morena koutou and welcome to this morning's meeting. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Margaret. Obviously it's our first meeting without her, and something that I admired incredibly about her was the vigour and energy that she took on this role with. She embraced the role as our Environment Chair and was always, I think, a fierce advocate for the environment in all of our different discussions that we had on matters all across Council, and I personally will really miss that. So I just want to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge some of the things that she's led in this committee. The Nature in the City strategy is an amazing strategy, and I think should be proud of the funding that we've got in that LTP to get on with doing the mahi. The environment principles, which will now lead on to a climate policy and environmental policy, which will infiltrate into all of Council and everything that we do and guide us in how we do our work to ensure that we're looking after our whenua, our environment. And we've got some exciting things coming up in this committee as well. Something that Margaret talked a lot about was planting trees, something that brings benefit in so many ways to all of us in terms of the well-beings. And so I hope that we can do some work there that will make her proud also. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything before we move on to the start of the meeting? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So to begin with, apologies. I don't... Yes. Oh, yes, Paula. And yes, sorry, we also to acknowledge Bunny Mortimer's passing. Would you like to say a few words, Paula?
I just want to take this moment also to reflect with respect the role that Bunny played in making Hamilton's environment such a better place. And we're talking about a legacy of a lifetime, not just a few years. Also that her and her husband were able to leave Taitua Arboretum to us, which is a taonga for all people for all time, is pretty incredible. I did have the honour, I've known her for a long time through her planting activities in the city, her gully work, her advocacy. But especially poignant for me was the honour that I had to award her Freedom of the City with her husband posthumously. And I know she was absolutely delighted, and she wasn't well at that time, and she knew that, but she was so incredibly strong in that beautiful, soft, dignified way that she had of going around. So I will always remember that. I think it's a moment the family can hold on and be proud of at this time of her passing. She knew she was passing. She embraced life. She also took on the challenge that she faced. But as I say, aren't we the better off, Hamilton, for the work of Bunny and her husband over many, many decades? May they rest in peace.
Thank you, Paula. I think it would be appropriate to take just a moment also to reflect on Bunny and what she's contributed to the city. If we take a moment of silence. Thank you. I know many, many Hamiltonians really treasure the Taitua Arboretum, so it's an amazing gift that she's given. Moving on to apologies, we've got Councillor Bunting online today. Is there anyone else who has apologies today? Noting that we're probably going to be done by, I would say should be finished by midday today. Yes.
I do have a midday appointment, but if that's when you might be finished, that might be no problem.
Yeah, I think it's likely. We've got a relatively small agenda, I think, so we'll see. I may have jinxed it.
Madam Chair, I don't know if I'm technically an apology being on Zoom,
No, just noting you on Zoom. There you are. Sorry,
I will
Mark.
apologise for anything I say.
Thank you. And thanks, Mark. Okay, so if we move in second, there aren't any apologies. Oh, for Paula to maybe leave early. All right, so I'll move that if anyone seconds. Thanks, Councillor Dave. Okay, and also aye. Brilliant. Confirmation of the agenda, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Paula? Mayor Paula, and all in agreement, say aye. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Moving on to public forum. So we've got several speakers today in public forum. Could I please call up George Lusty first to speak? Noting you've got 5 minutes, and I could allow a little bit of further time for questions, but we'll try and keep to that 5 minutes as much as possible.
Kia ora tātou, e ngā mana e tau mai nei, tēnā koutou. Yeah, okay, so on one hand, I'd like to thank the council very much for the Nature in the City program and the idea of sequestering 10% of, Hamilton's land for that, and also for the money that has been allocated towards restoration purposes. So that's great. I think that's great. But the issue being, at the meantime, the gullies are being infilled, and to us that are working in the gullies as expert restoration groups, it's kind of very scary that where we are working, the land is being infilled. So just one case that I want to talk about is the Upper Mangaiti Gully. Unfortunately, there's no, how can I say, no report's been done to the elected members on to the degree of the infill of the gullies. So that's unknown. How many gullies are being infilled at this time. But I've got some images here which you may have seen, and this is additional to previous images I've presented to council. This is happening right at this very minute. So if we can, there's the Upper Mangaiti, so that's off Sexton Road and Oderang Lane. So if we can look at the next image, please. You can see the extent of the infill, it's quite huge. The next, please. Next. You can see there's lots of poles being put in to try and hold the infill there. It's a mixture of soil, sand and trees that presumably the house is going to be built on top of. Next, please. This is this is like a big subdivision into the actual gully. Next. And this has all been consented by the Hamilton City Council. Okay, next. There's a pad there already on top of that fill. Next one. Okay, see the steepness to which it is going into the gully, which is supposedly going to be held by those poles. Next. Next. Okay, so this just gives you a heads up on what is actually happening in the gullies. Like I say, there's no system of reporting back to the elected members on the degree of infill of our gullies at the moment. So it is proposed, I think, in the district plan that they will be protected by significant natural areas. But in the meantime, this could take 2 or 3 years to get all the reporting done. So therefore, in the meantime, this infilling will be carrying on. I understand from planning they have no regulations or rules to stop this, so they're asking people not to build in the gullies, but they have no law to enforce that or rule. But there is an item in the RMA, so section 86B, clause 3, that can give immediate legal effect to protection of the gullies. And even if there is insufficient data for protection, that is a reason to protect it. Okay, so this is in the SNA and, in the RMA, specifically to halt development while research is being done. So on my paper that I have presented, a rule in a proposed plan, so if you guys propose a plan to protect the gullies, then that rule can take immediate effect. So RMA section 86B clause 3 says a rule in a proposed plan has immediate legal effect if the rule protects or relates to water, air or soil for soil conservation, or protects areas of significant indigenous vegetation, or protects areas of significant habitats of indigenous fauna. And that's where the rule is very powerful, because any corridors that birds or fish, eels use in that can be, the whole area can be designated as a significant natural area with immediate legal effect. And it just really has to be on the agenda to say that this is intended, and then outlines around the gullies. That's all that is needed, and that gives immediate protection until the RMA is until the protection is put. Now, it has been argued against that in the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, there's a lot of regulations. It's very prescriptive about how these SNAs have to be evaluated. But that is the purpose of the RMA section 86B3, to give instant effect. So I think if we can go to the next slide, there's the actual rules there that can give immediate effect. And next slide. please. Okay, the Waikato District Council, you can see in blue there, they've protected all their gullies under the exact same system, and they say that because it's protected because the data is still being evaluated. So you don't have to wait till after the data's done, you can do that immediately. You can see in the blue, all those are protected, but then you can see Hamilton, there's no protection as such. So I think they can do that. They did that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 2018 they've done that, pending the new district plan. So it's no reason to say we have to have the new district plan before we can do that. So I think that's my issue. I think this is urgent. The gullies have been infilled. We don't know how much infilling's going on. So I think that is urgent. So I would respectfully ask the council to treat that with some urgency. The council's doing great work on restoration, but we need protection as well. Yeah. So that's it from me.
Thank you, George. And I've got some questions. First from Mayor Paula.
Just thank you for that, and you know I know you've been watching that for a very long time. That's all residential land on the top of the gully at the moment, so it's all private ownership, isn't it?
Yes.
So your request is that when we review as we're reviewing the district plan, we propose to protect the gullies under that particular rule.
Yes.
In the RMA. And it will, and then as soon as the plan is operative, it will have immediate effect.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
it would have immediate effect as soon as it's notified to the public. It just has to say that this council is looking to put in this rule, and then on the public website, same as the district council has done, to say we are looking at instituting that, so therefore there's allowed to be no infill in the meantime.
So it's already been designated as a SNA or not? It hasn't?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's designated or not. All it needs really is an outline of the gullies. And if you look at the city soil map, it shows the soils of the gullies are very distinctive. So the soil map could be used to give an outline of the gullies.
Yeah, I had a role in the regional plan and the SNA work, as you will remember from years ago. But
Yes.
okay, I'll have some questions for staff. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. And Councillor Dave.
Thanks. I'm looking at the map in your written submission
Yes.
you gave us, and thanks for that. It's very handy. Those photos you showed of that recent work, which of the three areas is that in? The blue area that's got no work happening in it, or?
Oh, yeah, okay. So that map that I've got is, I think, of the Waikato District Council. So it's
I'm not
outside
talking about the map up there. I'm talking about the map in
slide one.
It's from the Mangaiti Gully Restoration Trust with the yellow, orange, and blue outline.
Oh, is that on a previous submission?
No, it's
Oh, yeah.
They
Can
won't
we?
have it.
Oh,
That one?
that slide's gone.
No, it's gone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, the first slide of my PowerPoint with the Google Maps, that's of the Mangaiti.
It's this one.
That's off Sexton Road, and then off that is the new road called Odering Lane.
Sorry, I know roughly.
So
where
I'm not sure about the yellow lines and all that.
Sorry,
but
well, hang on,
yeah,
can I
it's
hang on?
unprotected at the
Hang on a
moment.
sec. Can I just read this out because I'm trying to check. We've got in front of us on our agenda, you may not have it, but there's three different areas. One is your trust has got an area, about a third of the main gully area out there covered with work you're doing. The City Council's got another third.
Oh,
and there's
yes.
a third bit going out towards Gordonton Road. which
Oh
has
yes,
no
I've got
work
you.
going.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not aware of that. So the thing is, the Mangaiti Gully, I'm not working the Mangaiti. I'm working the Mangaonua,
Oh, so
but has
that's-
been brought to my attention. So the arm that Rex and his group are working, doing restoration, and it's the top of that arm where they're actually working. So
Okay.
they're working underneath that,
Yep.
and so they're very surprised that they're working in one area supported by council, and then there's the infil going on top of, basically on top of their work.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I understand that,
Yeah.
thanks. Madam Chair, look, I'm wondering as a result of these, whether this committee in your chair's report, which there isn't one,
Yeah.
but could be, whether we could put a recommendation through from this committee to the district plan subcommittee that's working at the moment, that this be brought to the high up in the agenda, because it's certainly not at the moment under discussion in the District Plan Committee?
So we've got in the next upcoming district plan meeting, this is
Was it?
part of the discussion there, and so it is part of that discussion already. But I am wondering whether I was going to ask Jamie Jamie Cyril to come in afterwards and answer a few questions if he's happy to. Around George's presentation, and then it may be a case that we need some further reporting to this committee, also around that infill and vegetation loss and the extent of it, and to see if there are recommendations we would make from here. But it is up for discussion in that next district plan amendment meeting.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely need a report that has
Yeah.
a look at this map, because a large part of the area of the trust, the Gully Restoration Trust is working on, presumably with agreement of the council, is actually covered by housing. The entire western side almost of St James Drive is actually within that area. So that's a potential worry. You can't see how far out the actual lots go, the sections go, but so it'd be good for some more detailed sort of mapping at the District Plan Committee to see the extent of the overlap of where people believe they can do that sort of work, and where the trust and or the council are doing restoration work, because the two don't really go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'll make sure that we have that kind of information coming through at that district plan amendment meeting. And it's personally, I find it incredibly concerning what's happening here. And through the district plan amendment, there is the opportunity to provide that protection. But in the meantime, there's the concern about how much we're going to lose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So there's more
Thank you.
discussion to
Thank
have.
you, Dan.
Okay, Maungai Norm.
Oh, kia ora.
Tēnā koe, ngā mihi mō tō whakaaro. I just want to point out a couple of other provisions. Say thank you for information. Te Ture Whaimana, which is our primary legal setting document in around Te Taiao, is another opportunity, and the objectives within that. Do you know what Mangaiti means?
Mangaiti is a small gully.
Yeah.
Small
So all the mangas are
stream.
streams, and so if you talk about a stream, water, the river, it's encompassing within that. So what I'd be interested is what does the cultural mapping look like in regards to those gullies? Because typically gullies often were places where things were stored, caves and bones, and along the Waikato anyway. So I think there's a real strong opportunity to provide another overlay with regards to the gullies around Te Ture Whaimana and the environmental plan Taitumu Tai Paritaiao, which talks about protection, to protect and restore indigenous vegetation. Wai manga, that's why all the streams are called mangas, but provide that cultural korowai to protect and enhance the natural fauna and flora, because typically home of the pika pika and all those sort of things. So thank you for that, and I'm keen to work with the team to look at our cultural overlay in regards to Te Ture Whaimana and Taitumu Tai Paritaiao, and the Ngāti Hau environmental plan as well.
Yeah, kia ora tēnā
Tēnā koe.
koe.
Okay. Kia ora, thank you, George.
Thank
And-
you, everybody.
All right, moving on to Martin Tope. Thank you.
I'd like to see a big increase in the staffing for city tree planting and greenery. Before I start, I wonder if I could ask you, could anyone here tell me what is the depth of the ice in the Antarctic? What is the depth of the ice in the Antarctic? Well, in actual fact, it's a figure that's worth keeping in mind, because on average, it's 2 kilometres deep. In places, it's 4 kilometres deep. And I saw ice melting in South Georgia 40 years ago. And I'm sure there was an iceberg in sight from Christchurch at one time. So I wonder when we'll be seeing icebergs around New Zealand. Yeah, climate change is urgent, isn't it? And action is urgent. And if you look at the way the city is growing, It's incredible, isn't it? Wherever we look, there's roads, buildings going on. And obviously this increasing of roading, infrastructure, industry and housing is increasing carbon emissions and reducing greenery for sequestration big time. I notice in the agenda the word sequestration comes up in the Nature in the City plan there. Are we in actual fact urgently enough getting progress on reducing CO2 production down? Now, a large amount of money has been spent on bikes, and cycling and buses. There's a vast amount looking at all the activities around the city. But in actual fact, we don't seem to be spending money on sequestration. And there's lots of benefits of making sure that the city is looking really good in terms of trees and vegetation. And I just wonder, how have the planting staff numbers increased over recent years? As the city expands, I presume you're going to have more staff for tree planting and greenery. But in recent years, the expansion has been incredible, hasn't it? It really is. It's explosive. I've lived, I'm 79 now. I'm here because of my grandchildren. I've lived in Nelson, Bluff, Lumsden, Hastings and Wellington. Hamilton's been my home for the last 17 years. And over those 17 years, my wife and I have walked for 30 minutes a day around Flagstaff and Rototuna, and we've travelled around the city finding places to walk. It's clear that the staffing numbers are not enough to keep up with suburban growth. There are gaps in street plantings. If you want to see some groggy, damaged trees, and there's plenty around town to see, Tarapa Road. If you think of Harley Davidson, and if you can think of that area there of Spotlight, one big sea of cars there, one big sea of cars, and the median strip further along is full of weeds and once again groggy looking damaged trees there. We've got designated parks which have remained undeveloped over many years, and it's good to see them being developed. At the moment, I'm very much enjoying Kori Kori Park, which is in front of the new high school. And it's a pleasure to see the overall design of it and the amount of work that's gone into developing it. But I should say that 50% of the new plantings there have died over the past year. And there's a lot of weeds around in what plantings there is there. I was just dreaming maybe the school and maybe the retirement village, which along one side, they could spend a bit of money on helping develop that park, make it really, really good. There's room for more plantings in many older reserves and parks. I think Calderlands Park, if any of you know it, over the past few years, will realise it's more enjoyable with the more plantings there. Okay, so have a look around for yourselves and see what you think around the city. And if we've set the standard here, we could get the schools, urban areas, city supermarket parks really cleaned up and looking really good. And the big thing is we'd have people walking more, we'd have people cycling more, and we'd have people keeping fit more, etc. Yeah.
But there may be some for our staff later on when we get to the item that you're speaking to on the Natural Areas Fund. So really appreciate you coming in to speak, Martin, and I think it's an excellent topic to be discussing here in this committee. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Joe Wrigley speaking on item 6, Natural Areas Funding. Thank you, Joe. Morena.
Morena, tēnā koutou katoa. He mihi nui ki a koutou katoa, tēnei te mihi ki a rangatira o tai o mihi. Me mihi ki tō karakia o te rā ko Norm. He mihi nui ki ngā mana whenua o te rohi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Let me start by saying thank you. Thank you for supporting the work of gully groups. With this $100,000 investment, you acknowledge the decades of volunteer effort and contributions that have attempted to conserve and protect life in our city gully systems. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge the passing of Councillor Forsyth. We had some robust conversations and valued her questions and summations of our work. While agreement was never a given with Margaret, her passion for and service to environmental projects is remembered well. GoEco is the recipient of $30,000 as a contribution towards employing a new role which is described as a restoration coordinator to support the gully networks to eradicate weeds. With contributions from other funders and a special mention to city parks and gardens, we have been able to add tools and safety gear to expand our volunteer support. The funding enabled us to establish this as a part-time role and then to seek philanthropic funding and donations to build the hours and support inclusion in a broader biodiversity community team with access to learning, development and peer support. Building relationships and networks is a substantive part of this role, and we have taken a long-term view of these. This has in turn enabled us to embark on developing a gully training and employment scheme, which we are pursuing with MSD. Hands-on participation in gully work has also informed and strengthened our views of the intersectionality of predator eradication, bat conservation and restoration work. The hands-on contribution of our coordinator has supported weed clearing in the gully systems in Kirikiriroa. Our coordinator has also helped establish a female youth-led group in the Mangaiti who work in the gully every Saturday. This group has cleared steep banks of blackberry and privet. Our restoration coordinator is working closely with Rototuna High School to develop a youth group that will also undertake work in the Mangaiti. Relationships with Taku Wairua have developed, and we have a Gully Restoration Day planned with them in the Mangaonua on the 29th of June. These are just some of the host of relationships and weeding clearing action that has developed in just the first 6 months. The information and experience informs us as a community-based capability and capacity building organisation and means that our biodiversity team has the information needed to organise predator-free communities, volunteer groups, learning and development. Without this role, it would have taken us much longer to understand the nature of the guardianship relationships and how each gully group identifies with the gully that they care for. Our biggest challenge has been understanding the sheer magnitude of the work and potential scope of sufficient maintenance to create space for Indigenous regeneration. What is needed now is a clear statement of support for the preservation of gully restoration and the expansion of biodiversity projects across the city. Some gullies have established hapu or mana whenua relationships, and others are establishing discussions and learning. We are supporting this by delivering workshops to support knowledge, development on Te Tiriti or Waitangi and the colonial impacts in the Waikato. It will take decades to regenerate the gullies, to develop intergenerational knowledge and understanding and a sustainable trained workforce. That said, there is plenty to celebrate already, and this funding has allowed us to clearly identify a pathway forward to support the telling and sharing of gully stories, to foster the sense of guardianship and care for these ecosystems. We hope to see this council walking alongside us as we move forward building community and capability in this space. We note in the agenda that this meeting will be receiving the progress report on the Hamilton City Council Climate Action Plan. We take this opportunity to remind you that community projects such as the broad scope of restoration and biodiversity work contributes to a resilient city and the Waikato Wellbeing Climate Target to reduce emissions by at least 25% by 2030, with net carbon zero emissions by 2050. In closing, we advocate for an expansion of the investment into community-based environmental education and experiences. We appreciate that our team is valued and respected in this space, and we continue to seek opportunities to collaborate with this council and community groups for healthy environments supported by thriving communities. We thank and acknowledge the Hamilton City Council and the council staff who have supported our work, encouraged us, given advice and worked alongside us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I nearly did it.
Almost. Very close. Thank you, Joe. And I've got one question from Mangai Norm.
Tēnā koe, e te taniwha o tēnei piko o te awa. I just want to acknowledge you, our guardian of this bend of the river, amongst the other champions in our taiao space. Just leaning towards Te Pau Manawa Ora, our cultural guiding document, korowai. Just question around the importance of mātauranga Māori in taiao restoration. Can you just sort of give your whakaaro e pana ki te mātauranga Māori and the importance of that?
Mātauranga Māori is an important knowledge framework for us and one that we seek support with. At the moment, our learning and development focus is on bringing tau iwi, working in the environment sector, along on a journey of understanding the history of the Waikato, the varying aspects that feed into that, which are the historical knowledge around Te Tiriti o Waitangi and He Whakapūtanga, as the first step before building knowledge around both marama takatanga and mātauranga Māori.
Ka wai.
Oh, thank you. And we are looking at having as part of our upcoming workshop in August, a session around mātauranga Māori and how we incorporate that into the work we do. So, or have it guide the work that we do, really. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora.
And well done on all your mahi. It sounds really exciting. Lynn Garnham speaking. Oh, I don't have what you're speaking on, but is it the natural areas update?
Mine was hurriedly thought at 8 o'clock last night and thought I have to come here and support Joe today. So it's just some highlights. It's curing, very good, Marina. The $100,000 that's gone to Go Eco for the Kirikiri Rural Restoration Forum has been absolutely fantastic. The stimulation that it has given to the 6 gully groups, the ability for them to, we've got 2 new employees, young, very enthusiastic young men who are working out in the community. So to assist with their salaries, we've been able to employ contractors. The groups have been able to employ contractors to get those jobs done that volunteers can't be asked to do, really, with the willows and the blackberry and everything else that takes over the gullies. So to me, the council has had a fantastic value for dollar. We also have, it's created amongst us a wonderful bonding with all the groups and sharing of information between the groups on how they're progressing, and also sharing of information. So every 2 months we have a meeting with council staff and they come along and tell us their roles in the council, which help us understand where the drainage goes and who to go to if there's a problem. So that again has increased our understanding, and hopefully that the council staff are getting an understanding of where we're coming from. So that's it really, but let's hope we can get another 100,000 in the coming up budget. Thank you very much.
No questions at the moment, but really appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and last one on my list, Te Kōpā King. Morena.
Morena tātou. Mihi ana kia koutou for having me here today. So, yeah, I'd like to talk about I don't know, maybe a few things. thank you to everyone. Tautoko, what everyone else says pretty much. When it comes to the Manga'ati Waiantaiao, Mangaonua as well, having some areas protected, like, I don't know, outlining in that the blue areas, and I think that is I think it's the gully owners' part, isn't it? Yeah, so that was something I wasn't really quite sure about, but I wanted to talk about today. I wasn't really sure. I wasn't sure if I was coming today or not because we weren't a part of that putia that was sent out, I think, last year and up to this year. So, but yeah, what to say now? It's good, wonderful that you guys have put that out to Go Eco to help tautoko, everyone that is doing their job in the community to help restore the mauri of our Waiantaiao or the gully restoration projects, and no, it's wonderful. I hope that in the next run, if you do end up giving up putia, that we actually get some of that to kind of build the mana and enhance the mauri of our Waiantaiao of the Waitā Whiriwhiri. I think everyone knows about the Waitā Whiriwhiri, don't you? Yeah, I don't know if I should go too deep into that because it's a very deep history, and it includes the iwi that we're from as well, which is from, I don't know, maybe outside of the district of Hamilton, going into Waipa. I think that was cut off a few years ago, and it divided our hapu from our other ukaipo, our traditional homelands, like our pā sites along the Waikato River. Yeah, so but yeah, I hope that in time we're able to maybe get some support with that putia. I'm not saying like get some of it, but actually have some of that used as funding for resources like PPE equipment, revitalisation equipment, planting equipment and things like that to go towards maybe helping us with our nursery that we're starting to get off the ground. So so every month we have a hui and wānanga just to explore ideas around how we can grow more and involving the people of Kirikiriroa and in this territory as well. And that happens every month, like the last week of every month. So the door's always open for people to come. It's never shut, so only if people want to be a hoha, But, what else? Yeah, around Te Tiriti o Waitangi and He Whakaputanga. That is a good kōrero to have a workshop about, because that not a lot of our iwi or hapu within Waikato are actually acknowledged in that. Yeah, there's different kind of whakaaro around who has what and who doesn't in this territory of Waikato. But no, yeah, we've done a bit of research as well when it comes to our wai of the Waitā Whiriwhiri. I've been learning how to monitor the water as well, and I did last week a not an official test, but just a mock test really, and the results didn't come back really well. They come back really, really bad. The high levels of E. coli are are really, really high. What it helped us identify is how we can come up with ideas how to filter that out. So because we did two strains, so we did one without filtering the water and we did one filtering it as well. And what that helped us kind of see is how filtering it in some sort of way can make that stream better for everyone and bring back some things like the kutai, the tuna, and a lot of other things as well. So, yeah, and Koda. And what else is there?
I've got a couple of questions. So, do you want to jump to those?
Can I just say one more thing? We don't.
Yeah, sure.
We don't have a trust set up at the moment, so we're not. I guess we don't have a charitable trust. The people in our group, we have over 40 people, are part of this kaupapa, but they're a bit kind of, they step back from having the trust idea of having a trust. A lot of them are kind of, back offish about it because, I don't know, they create a stigma about having a trust. So we're kind of looking at avenues and on who might be who we might be able to be in partnership as an umbrella. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's really good to learn about what you're doing there. And I've got 2 questions and then possibly one of my own. Mangaino?
Tēnā koe, te kupa. Just in regards, I was going to ask about the structure, because I'm thinking how can we help, and how can Joe and the greater network of champions help your greater cause. And I was wondering if the 100,000, Joe, could be turned into $1 million, through other funding opportunities, WRA, other philanthropic trusts that align to the... To Mackendale? Okay. Yeah, so how can we, so that we can nurture the resources to help service the greater resources of our people, because every stream's equal in terms of its mana, mauri, me era momo ahotanga, but how can we support and uplift and empower champions like this group in regards to their destiny to look after the Waitā Whiriwhiri. So my question was around the structure, but you're not there yet, eh? The structure's not there.
No, we're still in that process. Yeah, we're still in that process of having an umbrella for us, so that, or maybe an umbrella, not just an umbrella, but having our own structure available for kind of resources to come back to us. Yeah.
Okay. Ka pai. Kia ora.
And Councillor Angela?
I think my questions, based on what you've said, you've given me a whole lot of questions, but I think actually I might wait for the report. But if I can sneak in a comment, I remember you talked about some of these concerns when you came and presented on Māori wards, so kia ora for that, thank you. Yeah, list of questions for staff, but based on the submitters'
Cool, thank you.
proposals.
And thank you, Te Kopa. I am really interested in what you're doing, and maybe it's a case of coming along to one of your meetings to learn some more. What, in terms of the group that's working there, how long have you been working in Waitā Whiriwhiri?
Since the 2nd of January. So last year, in around about, I think while I was over doing another kaupapa in Fitzroy and Peacocks, I started to be attracted to not only our site's significance over there, but within Kirikiriroa, that we, through whakapapa and just through Matauranga Māori, that our iwi have, and for my kaumātua, that we're actually, quite well known within this rohe as well. And the Waitā Whiriwhiri, I just become so much more attracted to that. And then I just started to notice that a lot of things went right with it. The natural there's only a little bit of natural space there left. And what else is done to it is like 3/4 is just like, it's been manipulated by man. And a lot of it hasn't really enhanced anything. It's just made it into a drain pipe for sewage and illegal dumping. So the only thing that's left kind of natural of it is, I think, around Edgecombe Park. So that kind of attracted me to ring up the council, ring up the regional council, what's going on here, How can we get this back to a state where it's kind of respected, where people are going to go in and not just see that it's just a park, but see the significance of it, even the cultural aspects. So the past sites there, the urupa that's still there as well, and just the boundary of it, which encompasses a lot. So wanted to kind of, bring that up. And so what that did was lead me to being kind of recommended to create a restoration project, because apparently there wasn't one for ages. So not since the 90s or 1975, or not since the 90s. There's Mairoa Intermediate, but I think they only deal with like a really small portion.
Well, thank you for your initiative in that regard. And we'll have some more questions for staff around some of the points you've raised. So, kia ora.
Ka pai.
And cool, that's all. That's all for public forum. Do we need to? No? All right. We're moving on to confirmation of the Open Environment Committee minutes. Could I please, I will move. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Martin? Oh, you're not yet. You will be. I will be soon. Councillor Kesh, thank you. Okay, moving on to the natural areas funding update. Oh, goodness, sorry. Moving along too fast, too enthusiastic to get on with business. Okay, could we please, show of hands for confirmation of the minutes? Thank you. We're getting there. All right, natural areas funding update. Maria and Zeke, thank you.
Morena, Sarah, Me Paula, councillors and Mangai Norm. Want to open by saying thank you to our partners for their words this morning. Also, I'd like to introduce Zeke Fisk for those of you who don't know Zeke. Zeke works in our parks team and has been largely responsible for administering the annual plan fund. So, hand over to Zeke.
Kia ora, how are you all? Yeah, this is an info report on how the funding has been allocated through the year to date, and would just like to reiterate the group's appreciation and their thanks and the acknowledgement of the fund. A couple of key points for us, probably mirror what some of the speakers have just said. Some highlights are the seed funding that helped set up the restoration coordinator role through Go Eco. It's really improved our communication, our transparency and our knowledge of what the groups do for us and how we work together. And some of the projects that have been undertaken, like Lynn mentioned, the groups just can't get to physically or they're just not skilled to do it. So being able to bring in specialised contractors to do that for them has been really fantastic. Happy to take any questions at this stage.
Also note that we've got Jamie Seal here as well to answer any questions around George Lusty's presentation around the Gully info. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, I guess to start, obviously I've read the report, but Te Kopa this morning talked about funding for PPE gear, and I guess my question would be, all health and safety things aside, is there an opportunity for us, because to have like a pool of PPE equipment and I don't know, some tools of the trade as well that can be sort of lent out or borrowed to gully restoration groups? And so that's the question. And also, what do they do now? Because they're, with council's focus on restoring gullies, we're going to have more groups that either don't want to or can't set up a trust or whatever, but actually want to participate. So thoughts on that, general? Oh, staff?
So we have currently we have half a position, Jared Kelly, who's our coordinator. So he has stocks of tools of trade, spades. He helps the groups with the safety side of things. The nature and the city funding proposed through the draft 10-year plan increases that resource and therefore increases our ability to work alongside these groups and, help new groups coming into the scene.
And so does that include PPE gear as well?
It can, yes.
It can, it will?
Well, we still have to. Yeah, I was going to say we've been working in partnership with Joe and the team at Go Eco.
Yeah.
So we still have a bit of work to do in that space, but given that we're consistently talking, we're quite confident.
We're building. We're building a library of tools that are available to groups as well.
Yeah.
And, PPE gear is actually being designed at the moment. I guess we're probably going to have an arm wrestle over whose branding goes on.
I'm sure there's room for both.
The conversation is underway.
Yeah.
And being set for the next financial year, which is a month away.
Yeah, okay. So I'd really like to, I'd be keen to stay up to date with what's happening with that because, these people are working to benefit the entire city. It shouldn't cost them a cent. So, yeah, I'd be keen for this committee to keep an eye on that. And if we have to address it in an annual plan, a bit more funding or something, then I'd like that conversation.
And we
Okay,
can
thank
certainly
you.
pop that on the agenda for the bi-monthly meetings
Great.
with the Restoration Forum, and aim to come back to this committee more regularly.
Yeah, because I'm assuming that the criteria to, and I guess as it should be, the barrier of getting formal funding is that you have to be either a charitable trust or similar organisation. So there has to be other ways. You know, that's a very, I'm not sure how to say this, it's a very Pākehā way of working in the world that doesn't suit everyone. I hope I said that right. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Andrews, some really good points there. We've got Councillor Dave.
Yeah, thanks very much. I actually echo Councillor Angela's point. I can recall some work that we've done with a couple of just groups of neighbours in what we used to call the Mairoa Gully, for instance, and they certainly weren't a charitable trust, not at that time, and so I think the support that's needed and the groups involved might be quite a bit more widespread than officially recorded, so that's something would be good to home in on at some stage. But my question is related to the Waikato Regional Council and wanting to know what involvement they have in this program, and in particular whether any funds are available from Project Watershed, which is collected in part from Hamilton residents for protecting and enhancing and restoring watershed areas. And gullies are certainly watersheds, parts of the Waikato River watershed.
Yes, so there's approximately $250,000 from Project Watershed that goes into specifically that, protecting the gullies and networks that feed the Waikato River.
Yeah. Is that something that is the work that's happening in that area dovetailing in with this work? I mean, do the community-based organisations, gully restoration societies and so forth, do they get involved in discussions about how that's to be used and where the priorities are?
As Zeke alluded to, we have spent the last 12 months really building those relationships, so I expect going into the future they would be much more involved into those discussions, yes.
So the idea is that there's a bit of leverage that can happen there, that the 100,000 that helps the groups continue can also have an influence in the 250,000. What's the current amount of funding approximately from the regional council that's collected? Sorry, in this area, because I know Evelisa gave us...
Or Evelisa in terms of the wider waters amount.
You gave us a table about a year and a half ago or something showing how much was collected and how much was spent in Hamilton. It'd be quite good to just revisit that, perhaps.
Yeah.
Apologies, my memory isn't that good at the moment, and so that's something that we can come back and revisit and provide.
And I understand there is an update for Project Watershed Q2 coming to the Infrastructure Ops Committee, is that right, Evelisa?
Yes, and there is a future briefing planned in September to discuss the stormwater matters and so that elected members can be updated on the full stormwater and erosion Project Watershed I guess activities which we will include to the funding allocation.
Yeah, thanks. The reason I'm asking these is because I think there's a good reason for a holistic response, both in the sort of more formal areas like that perhaps, and the more informal community side of things, because clearly it's a big issue for Hamilton going forward into the future, and we need to marshal all those resources. I'm also thinking of perhaps regional council staff, whether any of them are involved.
Yeah, so I've had early conversations with Matt Veer from Regional Council, and once both the long-term plans were landed, we're going to get together and see how we can make the most out of the funding from each council.
Could maybe this committee next time, or I don't care which committee really in council, have some oversight on the whole area of work in this area that includes the regional council's parts of it?
I'm wondering, Maria, just pulling together the questions that we've had already, would these all come into an implementation plan? How could we get a holistic view of all the small groups that are working there that aren't necessarily part of the forum right now, exactly how we're going to be supporting them, and then also the question of what role Waikato Regional Council is playing and how we make sure we maximise the funding that is available.
Yeah, and absolutely, and you will have heard me through the 10-year plan discussions speak about the amount of work that could be done being this big, and the need for us to really target and align with our partners. Those discussions have started, but they are going to take some time for us to fully nail it. I also made a commitment through the 10-year plan that Council would be getting more regular updates about what is happening in the space, and I guess I would request that we have some time to set things up, and then I can honour that commitment.
Okay, so you'd be looking at potentially not this August meeting, but we could look at potentially the one after that with a more detailed update of everything that's happening in this space, and would that...
provided we can get anything that's needed into the next annual plan.
Yeah.
That should be the part of that report, maybe, you know, so that we can decide what if anything we'd like to propose for the annual plan. Thinking about Angela's point that we may need adjustments because there's more to this than currently is being supported.
Sean, is that, would that timing work if we looked at a report back 2 committee meetings from now?
Yeah, I think that'll work. Yeah,
Okay.
we can make that work for any annual plan implications can be sort of factored in there.
Thank you.
Would you be comfortable with that, Maria, and we can note a staff action in the minutes?
Yeah, and as I say, we're already underway with getting ready for the Nature and City funding. We have moved the operations team over to the nursery to signal that this is a moment in time where we're going to do things differently in this space. So we've physically moved the people, just as a way of getting their mindsets in the right space. There's still much to do.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Councillor Dave. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Just in terms of, I was aware of how the 100,000 had already been allocated. There's a little bit left. And in terms of supporting established groups versus the more, I'm not saying it isn't scientific, the best bangs for the buck for the 2 to 10%, which may in some cases be the same thing and may not always be the same thing. When will we or how are we going to make that transition to determining where our gully spend goes? That it isn't just all going to established networks, but it's going to broaden and deepen the biodiversity across the network, because Bruce Clarkson has spoken to this and talked about where we might, he's going to help create that plan, right? So where we might best invest for best return, and then we can line up the really, because we do so well off the back of volunteers, we can line those aspirations up together. What's the plan there, please, as far as allocating funding and getting the outcome?
Yeah, well, I guess, excuse me, we're yet to start those conversations, but as we've now have the funding through the Nature in the City program and what Bruce has brought up, so over the next year to 18 months, that very conversation will happen about how we undertake full restoration in our gullies and natural areas, and as such, how will we best spend that money in the gullies for the best bang for buck.
So off the back of what Dave and Angela said too, there might be money that's not necessarily to go into existing frameworks, but may go into new areas and use volunteers and resource from our organisation into new areas as well.
So Jerry Kelly deals with those less formal groups at the moment, or not deals with, works with. The Nature in the City funding is proposing another full-time role, the same as Jared's. So we recognise that, yes, we work with our partners in the organised sense, but we also need to bring people in. So there's a captive audience out there who are not currently engaged in their gullies, and we'd like them to be.
So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've got, we do the book brilliantly volunteers, I get that, but that science-supported approach
Yes.
that, and also as Bruce has learnt a lot over the many, 15, 16 years that, or more, 20 years probably, that he's been involved. We learn what works and what doesn't in terms of the order of planting, how you go about it. It's actually, and then that fits in with a mātauranga Māori approach as well, getting those two things lined up. So what you're doing is informed. That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
So you think that'll take a year to do?
There's been initial discussions with Bruce about what we call the quick wins.
Yeah.
So we're quite fortunate that Bruce did a lot of walking through gullies during COVID. And he speaks of some spaces that with really minor input would reach the significant natural area threshold really quickly.
Excellent.
And so we do have a couple of areas to target. So we've got the capital funding, the development funding, which Zika's talking, the planning and the leading time for those will be slightly longer, but the operational quick wins can essentially get started once we have those people on the ground, once we've had the right conversations with Bruce Clarkson's, checked in with our friends working in those areas, and I would say we would get started on some of those quick wins this calendar year.
This calendar year. Oh, that's good news. And in terms of working with other potential funders, are we involving them in that conversation to get that better alignment? Because I remember Honda Tree Fund used to do quite a lot in the city. We haven't had anything in the city for a while, but if maybe they'll be enthused by this better approach.
Yeah, we do need to get better at telling our stories to bring those funders in, and this council has acknowledged nature in the city as a priority project for our external funding team.
Thank you.
Councillor Kirsch.
Just a quick question regarding one of the LTP submissions was from the Scout group. Has the restoration coordinator, have they made contact with the group, or has that started? Any plans to start?
I would need to check on that, Councillor Kirsch, remembering that we've got half a person who's already very busy. So again, once we get our extra resources on the ground, we expect to make those community connections a lot better.
Thanks, Maria.
Excuse me, they approached us at 2000 if we have sessions with them.
Awesome.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Maxine.
Thanks very much. I'm a visitor to your committee.
Oh, I forgot you weren't a member.
Yeah, so good to be in the room, actually, especially with these conversations in this kind of report back. We've had also already a bit of conversation about volunteer groups and capturing them up, and I acknowledge the work that Go Eco are doing and being able to bring those wider groups information together. What kind of plans have we got for educating a wider public? I think about the volunteer armies of the university down south, rallying around the kind of crisis activity, but wonder if there's a bit more of a sustainable model that we can be supporting and providing connections to.
Yeah, we are looking at a few things. Recently, Mark, who will be leading the operational natural areas team, went with Go Eco staff members down to Taupo to have a look at a model there with regional council staff as well. So, and EnviroSchool. So we, we're not waiting for the money to arrive or the funding to arrive. We're starting to put our feelers out and looking across the country. We also have some good contacts in Auckland. A previous staff member, so I'm planning to send the team there as well. They have some quite good programs running, so
yeah, it's a bit of an untapped source, really, eh?
Yeah, at the moment we're in that kind of catch-22 position where we're still very, very short-staffed and under-resourced, and moving into the space where we will have additional resource, and we need to make that move so that the new team members come with us at the same time. So, yeah.
And on that, just would like to support the Chair's suggestion of an implementation plan that has, those pillars that can identify areas that do need strengthening and how they might be funded also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxine, and thank you for joining our committee meeting this morning. Mangai Norm.
He Pau Manawa Ora, and we've got a Pau, He Pau Manawa Taiao, which obviously speaks to the environmental outputs. So input, output, outcome, impact. At some stage, you know, you measure and quantify and qualify impact. But my question is, what's the role of iwi in mana whenua to date?
To date, it's probably fair to say that our engagement has been on a project-by-project basis. In the new world, partner.
Yeah, partnership to plant, I think, is what I think in my head, because so much can be done with the resources out there, the relationship with mana whenua, and the ability to tap into a lot of pūtea to plants.
We've dipped our toes into the water, and Zeke has been involved with the Ngāti Haumahi Trust partnership.
Yeah, so in the Mangiti Gully, currently Ngāti Hawa and Ngāti Wairiri have partnered up to deliver on some of the stimulus money that come out of the water reforms. So, yeah, it's kind of a leading into nature in the city. It's a really good way for us to start with the partnership model.
Yeah, and there's lots of opportunity with WRA, as you know. Yeah. But just tēnā kora, thank you for your beautiful mahi.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mangai Norm, and Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm not a member of the committee. At this point, just the key question. Dave McPherson used the word AP, annual plan. Presumably, I assume that'll be annual plan 2022. That is a magic word because that is money and funding and resource allocation. Would the GM just stress to me I want the exact timeline. So if this committee is minded to be, in terms of a workshop or various processes, making funding bids, in terms of the senior leadership team, what is the timeline?
From an annual plan point of view, we normally start doing the first cut of the budgets for next year from November of this year. And then that's usually, depending on sort of what's included in that, council normally debates and approves a draft budget, and would be around March next year.
So Maria Barry and the team, or anyone, you know, I'm looking at that at pre-November. What is the best sequence to actually ensure that is on the table in the first initial discussions as you start putting figures together?
Yes, I think so in respect of the matters we've been discussing, so the Environment Committee meeting is in November, so that would be a perfect time for these matters to come to the fore and to be raised, and then they could be considered in terms of developing any draft budgets, which then council as a whole could consider.
So for our November meeting, any relevant reports, we've got to assume, obviously the elected members will have input prior to that, but those are the magic date for those reports to start the bid. Is that my understanding? In November
Yes.
We certainly need to resolve in this committee some requests in terms of first cut.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got one question for you, Maria and Zeke, and then another question for Jamie, who thank you for waiting. Okay, the first question was just, we've had this 100K fund, which has supported gully restoration groups directly with their mahi, but going into the long-term plan, we've got the Nature in the City OPEX funding. Do you think that we'll be able to provide that same kind of level of support through that funding, albeit in a different form, or is it a case of needing to, still look at further funding opportunities going forward to provide that support?
I think in terms of the operating side, so the team Mark will be looking after, it's a bit like Councillor McPherson was mentioning, it'll be aligning with their work programs versus ours. So in terms of things on the ground, time on the ground, yes, we'll definitely be able to continue and grow that relationship.
Okay, so things like cutting down dead willow trees and all of that kind of stuff, while it won't be a direct grant, the support would still be there.
Yes.
Yes.
There'll be a significant increase in our current pest management budget. I think we go from about 70,000 citywide to 270.
Yeah.
So, there is significant increases that will enable us to target and work more closely.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is for Jamie, just around the issues that George Lusty raised, and you weren't here for the presentation, but I understand there have been some conversations already in this space, and it was really just understanding the process around the SNAs. George raised that we could do this immediately in terms of putting protection in place. How quickly can we put in protection over those gullies to prevent that kind of infill that we're seeing in places like the Odering site?
Sure. So, sorry, is the mic on?
Now it is. Yeah.
Right. So, I guess the starting point is that citywide review of our SNAs is part of the district plan, the scope of the district plan amendments that we're talking about, but that extends further than just in terms of this ecological space, I guess, than SNAs, but it will look at zoning and rules in relation to vegetation protection and habitat protection. In terms of how quickly that can happen, I think it's not a quick process, it's a Schedule 1 plan change process. It requires a significant amount of ecological evidence to support any change. So that work is currently being scoped, and we'll be looking at engaging ecologists or a team of ecologists to undertake that work on our behalf. And then I guess there's also in play the draft National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, which could, from what we hear, be gazetted in roughly July. So that's quite prescriptive around the process around significant natural areas and identification as well. So we'll be looking at whether any changes come through there and how that kind of frames up our piece of work.
Okay, and just Councillor Dave? Yes, yeah.
Jamie, my understanding is if council enacts or approves a policy related to future district plan inclusion, that starts having an effect from the time the policy's brought in, not a 100% effect. In fact, it was once described to me as a 10% effect, and someone else said it could be, quite recently, staff members said it could be higher than that, depending on the area.
Sure.
That you can start the ball rolling, in other words, and start having an influence quite early.
I follow where you're going with that, and I guess that comes back to George's point on the immediate legal effect. So objectives and policies, immediate legal effect. When it comes to significant natural areas or significant habitat, Section 6C under the RMA, once you notify those rules have immediate legal effect.
100% then.
The rules as well, yes.
Yeah.
But you can do something before that as a precursor, if you like.
Notification is that line in the sand.
Well, surely if we have a policy, this is what I want to tease out, because I'm getting different answers from different staff in this area. No offence, Jamie.
Sure.
But I have been told that one of the first steps, and this was in relation to actually built heritage items, if you have a policy that can affect, and was also earlier in relation to Hayes Paddock as well, the same issues came up. How can we put some protections in place ahead of the district plan work itself? And it was said, well, you need a policy in these areas which can then guide the thinking that goes into the district plan, and that starts having an effect from the time you put it in place.
Okay, we might need to come back to that and kind of tease it
I'd
a
like
little more.
Some sort of definitive sort of work on that in that area if we could.
Could we get that information back, Sean, maybe through an email, to an answer back just on the impact of policies, whether there's anything that can be done prior to the SNA notification?
About the formal district plan stuff, Jamie's right, it's not quick, but there are some we've always understood that there are things you can do before that.
And it could also come back via email, but also the district plan amendment committee meeting. We could get some further information there.
But getting to the point of notification won't happen in one meeting.
No, so we can kind of take that offline, Jamie, and
I think
provide some clarification.
that's the best action. I'm not aware of previous advice that's been received or discussions that have been had. So.
I just have one further question. So, Jamie, to clarify, currently the time frame for notification is around September next year?
September 22, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, thank you. Mayor Paula.
It's been answered. It was just around also the process for identifying SNAs that have that whole ecological science behind them. You have to assess them. Then you do have to notify the landowners of that potential that their land. So there's quite a process in that too, because some object to that, and then there's a process around that. So it is quite lengthy, isn't it, unfortunately?
Correct, and that's where the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, I think, is becoming much more prescriptive around how to work with both tangata whenua partners and also landowners and the wider community around the how.
The other thing I'd just like to through a question raised to the chair and staff for future considerations is, can we have a think about this and the implications of this under the RMA reform that's currently underway in terms of our feedback to government about how the RMA may shape up, because they're going to distinguish between built environment and natural environment, right, aren't they? So in doing that, one thing still has an impact on the other. Let's not be naive about that. So the built environment is going to have an impact on the natural environment. What do we want to say to the government in terms of shaping their thinking with the RMA review vis-a-vis natural biodiversity and SNAs? And I wonder if I can get some feedback on that at some stage. Timeline's pretty critical. I think there's end of June. There is the only end of June we get our stuff to government, and then they start thinking about first messages back. So it's really, really tight. Can I ask that work be considered? No, it doesn't need to be a big body of work. It just needs to inform that aspect of our feedback to government.
Through the chair, I'm happy to work with the staff members involved in putting that.
It's an opportunity, through you, Chair Sarah, it's an opportunity for us to shape that thinking right now while the RMA is under review.
Okay, thank you. Sean, are we able to note that for later on we can discuss how exactly we make sure that happens? Okay, thank you. A good point, Mayor Paula. If there are no further questions, then we've got a additional motion. Is that additional to, okay, an update to the motion? Yes, okay. That we request staff to report back to the next Environment Committee meeting on infill and vegetation in gullies and the work that's been, and connecting that with the work that's been taken with the District Plan Committee. So is there any, I'm just thinking who would that come under? Would that would be Maria's team? Or would it be the planning team in terms of any updates around this?
So you're looking for
looking for an update of some kind to just respond to some of the questions that have been raised today, to provide some more clarity to this committee.
Yeah, I'll take that offline with
Okay.
Through you, Chair, I wonder if we can are we noting in the minutes, or do we note in the recommendation that around
the RMA reform?
Around the RMA reform work that
popped it as a staff action, included
action
already. Yep.
Perfect, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you'll second that, Mayor Paula?
Yes, thank you.
All right. All in, what do we say? All in support, in agreement? I'm not quite sure of the right wording here. Say Debate, oh goodness, all right. It's a little bit rocky, isn't it? All right.
You aren't doing anything that nobody else has ever done. You're doing fine.
Some helpful passenger drivers, that's good.
Always.
Opening up for debate, do we have anyone who would like to speak on
Yeah,
this?
well, maybe I'll...
Yes, Mayor Paula.
I think this is exciting. It's really excellent to see. Thank you to the staff for showing us so clearly where the funding is going. And I do want to give a big shout out to all those established groups who have really shown great leadership and work off the smell of an oily rag usually to do the work that they do, born of great passion and drive to do the right thing for our environment. So thank you to them. But I also want to thank all the millions of, not wouldn't be millions, thousands of volunteers across Hamilton who may not belong to established groups but put their hours in here and there in various different ways across the city. And they certainly, Gerard's work is brilliant work. The way he harnesses we go to Arbor Day, it's coming up in June. But in between then, there are multiple planting days. I know, Sarah, you've been to some. And an amazing group of people from all around the community getting stuck in with their gumboots on, helping us. So I'm really, really grateful for the value that we get off the volunteer sector, and I do want to enable them. Speaking in support of Angela's comment, I do think sometimes the resources to do the work safely are a little bit of a barrier, and if we can provide in some way some resources to do that, that would be helpful to many and maybe make it easier for more volunteers to come. If they don't have the right tools in their tool shed, they can still come, still participate. The other part is I do believe that SNAs are really important. I do want to raise that up to the government because we are getting, and rightly so, taking away some of the barriers for urban development. So Hamilton's a prime example of the tension that exists here. On the one hand, we want to build homes, affordable homes, get them in, get people in homes. And I get that and I actually accept it. But at the same time, we've got this precious environmental resource to which we haven't been doing historically all that well. We're not alone in that, that's a national trend. But we need to do better, we need to move from the 2% to 10%. So I want to make sure that every dollar, and I'm really grateful to Bruce Clarkson for his work on this and our staff, every single dollar that we spend from this fund should be incrementally moving us from that 2% to the 10%. So we do have to have science, mātauranga Māori, informed work, and we need to line that up with the volunteers that we have so each is strengthened, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, let's be pretty definitive. Let's have a really urgent conversation about how we feel about our natural areas and how that should inform the New Look RMA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Councillor Martin.
Totally applaud and agree, obviously, as you would, with Mayor Paula's shout out to some key wonderful human beings and individuals who are doing so much. What I'm hoping in that report, when you report back, is you have one line of work that you influence the work being undertaken by the District Planning Committee in this regard. The photos we saw earlier on, initially, obviously, all areas of settlement have a structure plan, and what is the criteria where something is a private section, freehold private section in the private domain, and what do you allow that property owner to do within that freehold section as against, should part of that have been part of the gully reserve, or are there some extra layers of rules? When people purchase a property nearby a gully, there are obviously there's certain criteria. So I'm really interested in learnings, because dare I say it, the photos that we were shown, and there's tons of examples of this in even some of the older suburbs with intensification, right? Some of the consequences of intensification, developers are looking for any land that is available to intensify. So again, this is currently permitted, and what are the learnings from that? I pick up Mayor Paula's point of view in terms of saying to the government, we don't want people living in cars or motel rooms. Obviously, We want people in warm, safe, dry homes, get that. But that shouldn't be contradictory with decent urban and environmental design and outcomes. And I do strongly agree with Mayor Paul is that we have to have the dialogue, with the government of the day in terms of their national New Zealand-wide edicts at this point in terms of, because with respect in this city, we are in something of a perfect storm. And I'm going to be absolutely reassured that the new Peacock area, of course, we don't have these particular problems duplicated. But if there is any issues in the new area, we need to move very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. We don't have any other speakers. I'll just take a moment to firstly say thank you to our volunteers. Lynn and Joe have already left, but thank you to Kōpā and George for all of the work that you do in our gullies. And to Kōpā, I recently visited Waitawhiriwhiri Gully just a couple of weeks back. Someone took me through part of the gully, and once you got down into the deeper parts of it, there was some beautiful native vegetation there, and it was quite a magical place other than the rubbish that's been dumped in there. And I saw 2 very large rats swimming through the stream, which was a bit, one piwaka waka and 2 rats. So it's a bit of a sign of the health of the ecosystem. Hopefully, well, let's hope that in another decade's time we see no rats and many more birds and other creatures in there. In terms of and staff, sorry, I also want to thank you, Maria and Zeke, for all of the work that you're doing, both to work with the gully restoration groups right now. I've had really good positive feedback that that relationship between council and our restoration groups is improving, and there's a lot more communication that's happening, and that's really positive. And also for your work preparing for our Nature in the City program in the LTP. I'm very excited to see that start to roll out. In terms of the gully infill, it makes my heart sink to see those kinds of pictures up there, and there's many other examples of properties going up for sale at the moment where they've got gully section, open streams, all sorts of wetlands on the back of those properties, and those real estate signs are saying develop, and those real estate agents are selling those properties as places to develop. And I'm very concerned about the amount of gully area that we're losing, because if we want to get to that at least 10%, then we need that land there to fulfil its potential. And I think that a lot of people do value living at the up against a gully, and they love the nature that they can enjoy and all of that. And yeah, it's really unfortunate that this is happening right now, and the sooner that we can put those legal protections in place, the better. Finally, thank you everyone for all your really good questions and input on this topic. I've written down a lot of notes for us to discuss later in terms of issues from PPE to how do we support groups who might be struggling to do things like setting up trusts. How can we better support our community? And the connections we can create within our community through this work are really exciting. So thank you. Right, let's take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye, all those against? Carried. And we're going to go for a 15-minute break. So we'll be back at 11:20. Climate Action Plan. Thank you, Charlotte. Cool, go ahead. Morena? It's still
Morena.
morning? Yep.
Morena councillors and Mayor Paula. I just wanted to acknowledge that this report really draws on work that's happened across the whole of council. So obviously the climate change response for council is delivered across all of our business. So we've tried to capture what's happened over the last year in this report. And just an additional note, with the climate change readiness assessment, that was really an operational assessment we did to try and understand where we're at as a council. And we've ticked off a couple of quick wins with that one over the last year with the strategic risk, getting climate change elevated to be a strategic risk, and also in terms of establishing our internal systems with our climate change steering group and our working group, which will really help progress our climate change policy and strategy over the next year. You will see all the actions related to that readiness assessment embedded into the Climate Change Action Plan for 2021 and 2022, which will be coming up in August. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions on the climate change the update on the Climate Change Action Plan? Yes, Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Look, the attachment there was really good to read through. It's extremely interesting, so thanks for that, especially for the pictures. As a true councillor, I respond much better to pictures than to words, after all these years anyway. But I did have some questions relating to that. And it was more, one part was to do with trends. Snapshot in time, I'm looking at for instance, by way of example, the pie chart on page 20, which is in the attachment 1 there. It says tiny fraction, 0.2% working from home. What I would like to see in addition to that, how many carbon emissions, what percentage of carbon emission does that displace? If someone works from home, how does that help or hinder the, would it have been twice as much if they came into Hamilton City Council each day, that sort of thing? It would be helpful to know, so give us a lead on whether we encourage people to work from home or do something else. So that, and another one on the same page was the 2.5% waste to landfill. How has the recycling change a year ago changed that? Has it improved it by any significant amount or not? So the raw figures don't sort of tell us whether you're heading in the right direction or give you a lead as to what direction you should be heading towards.
Yeah, I think so. The waste one's relatively easy for us to be able to do, so we can look at what it was in terms of tonnage of carbon emissions previous year and then what it is for this year. That's quite straightforward. The energy one is a little bit more complex in terms of looking at what the energy reductions are in the business, what they are from the working from home numbers, and knowing how many staff are working from home.
Or are we just using just as much energy, even if the building's empty here?
Yes, so we can look at our energy management system and try and start to understand what those trends look like.
It's more a trend, Charlotte, that we're after, point us in the right direction sort of thing, not to get something that's absolutely precise and can be used in some international thing, I guess. I had another couple of questions relating to transport really, and one was related to page 21 where it talked about some of the reductions there are emissions, but they related to the building and staff work and things like that. What about, and I'm thinking, what about our transport? And then I looked further on to our transport plan as our response to that, to climate change within the city, and bearing in mind that transport was, when you add the different types of transport together, is the largest part of our emissions as well as the city's emissions. And this is not reflection on the report, it's a reflection on what happens in council. I was totally underwhelmed by the workplace travel plan, or what I think is completely lacking. And this might be a question to Eva Lisa, it's sort of addressing, on page 23, it's a heading, addressing our council emissions, leading by example. So there's a couple of targets there for relating to methane and things like that, which relates to our energy use, I guess. But then I'm looking over the page at transport and the workplace travel planning, and it's the most we can offer there is provide information for staff around travel options. Well, hell, I would have thought we could have done that about 25 years ago. What are we doing to encourage the use of those options? Where is the, I'm thinking here's Angela and I and Sarah and others at the Waikato Connections Committee demanding to know what the councils are doing about getting hospital staff and university staff to use buses instead of cars, and the incentives that are being put in place for that. I'm looking there, where's ours? Where's the thing that we've been talking about for 12 years on this council in that space? The alternative use of fleet vehicles, like using loop cars, it's been an idea being around for 4 years here. Getting more EVs or any EVs in the fleet. Gee, we've got 2 extra bicycles, and are they shoved in the downstairs car park like the original 2 we had? Or are they up in some, where's the rewarding of staff
Very good question.
for using cycling or public transport or walking? Instead of just giving them a list of options. I could go and give them a list of options. I could have done that 5 councils ago.
Thank you, Councillor Dave.
So that's my diatribe. And could you confirm that nothing's happening?
A chain of questions. Yeah, thank you.
Are you behind me?
I was enjoying the questioning, so
Through the chair.
Yeah.
So through the Regional Connections Committee, Hamilton City Council has partnered with Waka Kotahi, the Waikato District Health Board, in terms of developing an organisational travel plan for the District Health Board, and that is reported through the Regional Connections Committee. We're taking learnings from that, and we have also engaged a consultant on our travel planning, and it's not just about options. This is about, there's policy changes, there are options that Councillor Dave has rightly pointed out that we are looking into. But remembering there is also the ability for us to not buy fleet, but actually utilise our partners that provide those personal hire devices in terms of transport to the public, such as Lime and other options that are out there. So we are also scoping those out. We've been trialling Loop in terms of instead of fleet. So that is coming, and I also have recalled an email from elected members, particularly from Councillor McPherson, regarding wanting to be part of that development in terms of principles to actually support, as there was a will that elected members would like to be part of that travel planning also, the optioneering, before it was actually put in place. So that was in May last year. So we're just working through all of those aspects to bring forward a plan. And the expectations from elected members were it was one that we could actually provide to businesses in the city to say, here's an example of what is of a good travel management plan or travel plan for staff in your businesses.
But with all due respect, Eva Lisa, that's what you usually say when you disagree with someone that's just said something. Look on page 23, it says leading by example. So what are we doing as a city council now? And those things you talked about getting plans for, how many years ago did the Loop idea come before this council? How many years ago did the idea of a discount on PT for Hamilton City Council staff come before this council for discussion? How many years ago was the idea of moving council cycling cycle parking up to a prominent space in front of council or somewhere similar come before council. I'm sorry, you know, this, and you know, if all those other things are imminent, why aren't they mentioned in this report? Because they're not. You've told, the only things you've told me I've been hearing for years.
Do you have some timeframes around when this is coming to us, Evelisa?
The travel plan is expected to be completed by November this year. So November 2021. And in place for our organisational staff.
Does that answer your question, Dave, or do you want further?
Well, it doesn't say what's going to be in the travel plan, and reading this, it just says we're going to give information to people. You could cycle, or you could PT, or you could walk, or whatever, which I haven't seen any evidence of any new thinking on the ground.
So that's what we're working through, to actually understand what that new thinking is. Post-COVID, our world has changed in terms of travel demand, particularly for organisations where there is the working from home options, as well as the increased cycling, walking, public transport. So we are packaging all of that up together, and I acknowledge we haven't done it as quickly as elected members had wanted, but we are onto it now.
And just acknowledging Councillor Dave's questions there, in terms of the elected member involvement, will there before November be that opportunity for some involvement to kind of work through those policies?
Yes, that's my expectation.
Okay, thank you.
The reason I'm raising this so vociferously is that it is extremely hard to demand that the DHB or the University of Windtech or other big employers do a lot in this space if we're not leading by example, which we aren't yet. We have the regional council about to move in, or moving in today, or something.
Debate?
Yeah.
Councillor Dave,
No,
would you know?
and I want to know what we're doing to push them, a major, the outfit that organises all of our transport funding in the Waikato, across the road from us. What are we doing to ensure that they don't need acres of car parks?
So you'd like to know what we're doing working with the regional council as well?
That's one of the things, yeah.
I can confirm the regional council has a travel demand management plan, and they have incentivised staff in many different ways. So we are working alongside, so the consultant that we have engaged also has developed the regional council's travel demand management plan.
Would it be...
Well, those consultants when are they going to talk with us?
Yeah,
or
would it be
hear what we have to say?
worth having it come to the Regional Connections Committee or infrastructure?
So can I suggest that that's done through the Infrastructure Operations Committee in terms of an elected member workshop, or an Environment Committee request for input into that, so that it actually can be tabled onto the program for briefings or workshops?
Councillor Angela, your thoughts around the best way to...
Yeah, very happy to do that, because I think, there are questions around actually how much could we force a big employer to submit travel plans? What's the impact of that? Can we actually then enforce it, or who's incentivising? Yeah, so and I agree with Dave's frustration around this too. So maybe we raise it at the Connections Committee that we're going to be having the conversation, invite them along, and because I'm aware that they've set their one because they're a huge lack of parking in their new building, and they are incentivising bus trips as well, so we can get cracking and learn from that. And I'll make some notes
and we'll note that down also as a staff action, that we have some form of discussion around travel planning, which includes what Regional Council is doing.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
I'll do it now.
Councillor Dave?
It sounds like something we should have done 10 years ago.
Would agree.
but otherwise it sounds okay. All right, brilliant. We'll move on. Councillor Kirsch.
Just one question around that DHB travel plan. It says that it's due to be completed in June, as in this month. Will we see it? Will it be shared with us?
Being emailed to us when their computers are back up and running.
Well, that is true.
Yes, I believe we will be able to share that travel plan once it's finalised and complete.
Awesome. Thanks, Evelisa. And just a curiosity question. On that same page, page 25 or page 26 of the attachment, it says, within the last 6 months, staff have optimised traffic flow on the Mill Street and Te Rapa Road corridors, resulted in a 35% reduction in travel time. What does that mean?
That means they've changed the way the lights, traffic signals are configured.
Oh, wow.
And so so they've optimised it in a way that reduces the amount of time that cars are waiting at those signals, sort of like rephasing and experimenting in that type of way.
Because 35%, I mean, that's quite a significant reduction. Yep. Is that an ongoing exercise to look at other areas of congestion?
Yep. That happens. So with our transport team, they do that as much as they possibly can at the signals that are causing or they've identified as hotspots in terms of the reliability and timeframes. So they do little tweaks to see the impact and successes, which this is one of them in terms of the results that we've seen.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Mia Paula.
Thank you. I see the climate action plan from the organisational lens and supporting some of the comments around that, but the work of a bigger understanding of our role in addressing the city's climate, not our city council's climate action. I'm still waiting to understand what it is you could legitimately say we're already doing that has, so like a one place to go and say, we just talked about planting the gullies before, and that's a significant climate action. The work that we're doing on restoring the riverbank through catchment works, that's a significant action. There are some travel things that are significant actions for the overall city, so I want to grab hold of that. There again, are we participating sufficiently at the local government level? I'm on part of an advisory group and so on, and we were talking yesterday about the RMA, the Natural Built Environment, and the Climate Act that they're proposing, and wonder what we could do to provide some leadership in that direction.
Yeah, Charlotte, thank you.
It's a broad question, I know. But.
So on a couple of points, so I guess to date we've really been focusing on stock taking what we're currently doing. But we're just moving into that space of developing up the climate change strategy, which is really talking about what we see the future for Hamilton being. And I think as we build that, that's about where we identify what those key strategic things are and where we want to strongly advocate into those channels. So I'm involved in a few groups where we're trying to build up joint pictures around how do we put into the RM reform, how do we engage in those processes from a climate change lens point of view. So I think it's trying to figure out what it is the future climate change strategy is for Hamilton, setting that up and knowing how do we then strategically influence based on where we know we want to get to as well. So we've got lots of bits and pieces which we can use right now, but we don't have that uniform picture of our future.
Yeah, we don't really have a uniform picture of what we're doing right now. As you say, it's bits and pieces, and I've been asking for that work for some time and wonder whether it could be done so we can collate in one place what it is we're already doing as a sort of a baseline for where we go forward. And I don't see it as a big body of work, but it would be cross-portfolio, drawing together those threads. Just to put in one place so that people go, because I tell you what, it's not clear on our website what we are doing as responsible citizens for Hamilton.
So we'll be developing up an action plan for this year, which will, I think, be slightly different. We'll build on what we did this year because this was put together quite quickly in response to what we were doing. we'll look at what we've got in our 10-year plan. We'll assess what we funded and what's going to deliver on our climate change sort of response, so from both a mitigation and an adaptation point of view, and we'll bring that to the Environment Committee at the 26th of August meeting. So that will be a very clear picture of everything we're doing across council that delivers on climate change.
Okay, cool. So that's the piece of work I've been asking for that brings it all in one place on the 26th of August.
And we're also going to be looking at the website and how do we better tell our story on there. Luckily this week we've got a new support helping 2 days a week in this area. So that's one of the key tasks that she's going to be picking up straight away, is how do we tell our story better on the website as well, for others to be able to see what we're doing.
Thank you.
And just for some clarification, Mayor Paula, some of the summary of what we've been doing in the past year was in that climate action plan update.
Yes, but it's taking the lens of City Council. That's my point.
I think it was a full citywide of what we're doing, but taking your point. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Angela.
Oh, no.
No?
No.
No questions? Okay. Councillor Martin.
To pick about the comms strategy and Dave Mack, you know, the picture thing, 1,000 words. So on our, and look, I'm sorry I haven't reached, you know, I need to look at our website, but our material. So, you know, what does Hamilton Kirikuro look like in 2025? Do we have a fleet of small and large electric buses or hybrid buses or whatever? In 2025, 2030, as a corporate, you know, following appropriate negotiations with our unions and staff, what does our corporate fleet look like? I have great joy, but I have to be a little bit careful not to lecture council on as I pass the big diesel petrol driven trucks that are coming in through the staff entrance here in the Curra Street car park. But what does our fleet look like? So we've had the...
Okay, so your question is around our fleet.
Well, I do ride share as well. But the question simply is, number one, in terms of comm strategy, we spend, you know, how are we communicating our vision for what we want to see? And obviously we're inspired by the Regional Council Land Transport, you know, program.
Questions, Councillor Martin.
And what does it look? The question number one is, if you're communicating to the people, what does this city look like in 2025? Simple stuff. 2030. What do we as a corporate look like? All right.
Okay. Totally agree. I see this as a key bit of the climate change strategy development, is actually going out to the community and talking about with them, what do you think the city will look like? So we can create pictures and images and talk to them and challenge those ideas around, in 2030, what is the city going to look like? In 2050, what is it going to look like? And that's what will actually create our strategy. And that's the engagement piece that we need to do in developing it, and then actually having that and going communicating back more broadly to our community around what we think that future will look like for Hamilton. So I think it's critical. That's the way to engage with the community on climate change, because it can be such an abstract thing. So to say climate change is, you know, happening, what does that future look like? So yeah, totally incorporate it into our strategy development and implementation.
And obviously acknowledging the good work of Angela and the team in the Connections Committee, you know, our partnerships with the Regional Council, so that people get to understand where Regional Council just down the road and their new, and we fit. Is that will that be part of it?
Yes, definitely. Through the climate accord that we're establishing, Regional Council will be one of our key members. And we've just been talking to them about how that looks and how do we build it in a way to collaborate with them on doing that.
Recognising that there's a heap of work done across different parts of this council, through the chair to the GM, what we must know is, in time for next year's AP, is that we are adequately resourced to do all of this work, and I recognise there are different spheres. Could you confirm?
Yeah.
For some reason, I do enjoy the GM's sense of humour taking my nameplate, but that's good. You have an amazing sense of humour, sir, and I think that's wonderful.
purely accidental, Councillor Martin. Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that there is, so in terms of resource from a specialist point of view, there's Charlotte, and as Charlotte has alluded to recently, Poppy, sitting in the back, has joined the team as well. That is, and we're using external resource to actually help shape up the strategy as well. In terms of the climate, from cross-organisation point of view, there is a climate strategy steering group which has been established with key parts of the organisation. So we're drawing on existing resource within the organisation. If, as we are progressing that work, if we identify that there is more resource needed to give effect or to develop that work, then yes, we can bring that back to an annual plan conversation if we identify that more resource is required to give effect to that, both in terms of the strategy development, but also as we kind of get to a point where we're identifying actions that might need to be taken or money that might need to be invested in delivering some of those things. We can make sure that that's included in an annual plan budget conversation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. Okay, we've got one more question from Councillor Mark on Zoom.
A question around, we're looking at doing some bodies of work around access to natural swimming water or aquatics, and you I've talked about the effects of climate change and people needing access to swimmable water. Is there going to be room in this body of work to start incorporating that?
As we look at climate change risk assessment and our climate change adaptation and strategy, then definitely that's one of the things we need to think about is how broadly climate change, the future climate states that we're looking at, will impact on our diverse services and operations. So yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so should we, as a community committee, be kind of tapping into you as well to add some weight to what we're doing in there?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Cool, thank you. Good question. All right, any further questions, or otherwise we'll go to debate? Do we have a mover, please? Would someone like to move the update? Well, there's not much excitement. Well, yeah, it's because Councillor Ewan isn't a member, so he's not jumping in there. Councillor Kirsch, thank you.
Otherwise, would you leave?
Yes, and a seconder. Yep, thank you, Mangai Norm. All right, we've got a mover and a seconder, and now we can move to debate. Brilliant. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Yes, Councillor Martin first.
I'm not a member of the committee. I'll go after Councillor.
Oh, I think it's fine to. You're, as our future chair as well.
Obviously, I want to compliment the team on the work to be done. I think Dave and also Angela highlight, some issues, and I mean, obviously, our relationship with the regional council is crucial because there's a partnership. I obviously will assume that our comms team are going to be intricately involved in how we communicate, because at a general layperson's level. There's nothing to fear. In fact, there's everything to hope for in a genuinely city that embraces climate change and embraces a better urban and environmental landscape, so to speak. I do think, however, we need to be clearly, whether it's through the AP or LTP, just clearly outlining what our timelines are. And so I think a little bit of a focus, if we can say, look, the city's looking like this in 2025 or 2030, 2035, etc. What are our challenges in terms of our LTP and AP planning? But I think, and I did through you ask our GM a very deliberate question around just ensuring that we are adequately resourced for the work that we're doing in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dave, you've disappeared. Are you? Oh, you're back. Yep, we're good. No, there you are. On the other side of the board.
As soon as we get invited to speak, they switch sides. But they're very quick, too quick for the chair.
Too quick.
I've had that problem too. Look, this is a good start off, this report, but all it does for me is show the abject failure we've been as a council for some years now. And in fact, I think it was, is it George Lusty, when he spoke earlier, highlighted the fact that we're doing less now than we were about a decade ago in terms of the gully. It's not just the gullies we're doing less of, we're doing less in the advocacy area, we're doing less within our own council, in my opinion. We went backwards in the council from 2010 to 2016, in that period in this area, unfortunately. And we're seeing the lack of effect now. We're seeing the downside of that now. I can't, in all honesty, go out and harass the Waikato Regional Council or other businesses, including the DHB, to have better travel plans, to stop putting their staff in the position of having to use one person, one car to transport all the time, if we're doing nothing about that as ourselves. The part in the report that talks about us leading by example should be excised, because it is not leading by example in the current situation, knowing what we know, to simply put options in front of people, or to have a report coming on whether we're going to do Loop or another car share arrangement 4 years after it was first proposed in this council. That's not good enough. I'm going to vote against this, not because staff have done bad work in preparing the report, because it shows that council haven't kept up with the times, with anything really that we should be doing in this area, other than perhaps the energy efficiency of this particular building, which has been going on for about 20 years and has shown some improvements. And things like the traffic light, sort of better synchronisation. The problem I have with that, that's great for the buses, but in actual fact, it helps far more cars than it does buses, and probably encourages people to, for instance, to drive more along the Te Rapa Road route than before, because it's less congested, the traffic flows smoother. So I'm not sure that that's a good outcome at all, because if we're talking about that example of the Comet route, where are the layout changes of the roads, the changes of the intersections that give buses priority? All that's happening is buses that are on that route, as a byproduct of the light thing, happen to be able to go a bit quicker, but so can everyone else. So, you know, what are we doing to change things? There's some words I just had, but I'm allowed to say them here. I'll use the initials, SFA. So, you know, I'm really disappointed in this council, and in all of us too, it's not just staff, for dropping the ball for so long on this area. And I would like to see a much better action plan, or an action plan that gives us a much better lead on what has to be done, and it's way behind time. You know, the climate change emergencies we talked about 2 years ago, well, they must be like that slow-moving earthquake, not an emergency. I was waiting for you to tell me to stop.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Zoom? No, we're okay. So I'd just like to take a couple of minutes. In terms of some of the points Councillor Dave made, I think there's a couple of parts to it. There's, I guess, the work that our staff are doing, but really there's also the funding of and the resourcing, because ultimately if we want to take real climate action, then it all comes back to our long-term plans and our annual plans. So in terms of really speeding up what we're doing, we will need to make sure that there's adequate budget in there to make that happen. And with our climate strategy, which is due March of next year, that will be in time to help inform our annual plan to some extent, but it has to feed into our long-term plan as well. And that's where that really big action will happen, where we, if we put in that funding. I have to say, in terms of the update, there was some really good information in there. There were a couple of things that raised my eyebrows as well. One of them was around the transport system optimisation, and a claim that tinkering with traffic signals is helping walking and sustainable options such as walking and cycling, and I wasn't quite sure how it was doing that when it was actually optimising traffic flow, but that's okay. So I guess it's just I think going forward, making sure that with these updates that we're a little bit critical in terms of what we're putting in here and saying is actually beneficial in terms of climate action. And similarly with things like the update around the fleet, it talks about use of electric trucks, but actually only 5 or 6 of our trucks are electric out of the entire fleet. So we need to be really transparent with this reporting as well. And I talked to Charlotte about the idea of actually having traffic signals, so we have all our key actions on one page and we can say, yes, it's in progress, no, it's not, or we're somewhere in between. So I think clear reporting to the community will be really important going forward, and just making sure we take a really critical lens over what we put in these updates. Right, that's all. Well, I will put it to the table, and all those in favour, let's actually go to the board for this. So if we can vote now. And, Mark. Yes, yep, we've got...
The motion is carried, noting that Councillor McPherson is dissenting.
Thank you. And we're on to our final item, and Charlotte, you can come back to the table. Right, so we're on to opportunities for influence national and regional climate change response.
So this report came out of a few discussions that we'd had at the committee around different upcoming opportunities, and as Mayor Paula talked about earlier, the RM reform being one of the bigger ones that link into environment and climate change. Following on from the development of this report, I was then informed that there is currently a stakeholder engagement plan that's under development for the organisation, which is going to be for SLT and for elected members. So there's an opportunity for us to really feed into that with the climate change priorities, linking into all these major reforms that are underway, and the 5 council priorities and some of these big projects that are currently being looked at, like 20-minute cities, which is really a key thing in terms of climate change and reducing emissions. So there's that piece of work that we will also as staff be feeding into, and elected members will have the opportunity to be getting involved in that and put the climate change lens into it. The other thing is, yesterday I received a bit of an update on where the MFE work programme is at, and we have got some upcoming opportunities to influence the key pieces there. So Climate Adaptation Act, it looks like we're actually going to have some local government workshops happening, so August, September time. And also similar with the emissions reduction plan, they're going to be running workshops for local government in July and August, and giving us an opportunity to really influence what is going into that emissions reduction plan for the country. And then the National Adaptation Plan. So there's a lot happening. The National Adaptation Plan, they're also going to be consulting and working with local government in July and August. So all these key pieces are really key, not only from a climate change point of view, but when the RMA changes come into effect later this year, they link into district plan as well, and the requirement to consider these documents within district plan processes. So just those were key updates that just happened since writing the report that I wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor Dave?
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for that update information too. The MOT and NZTA travelling roadshow thing has spawned some quite good discussions in the past, but one thing, could you check before they take place that the organ grinders and not the monkeys are going to be the ones turning up? Because seriously, we've often spoken to people who aren't the authors and can't do much except take some notes and pass them on. So that's maybe a point in relation to that.
I can take that back, and when I'm talking to the relevant people at MFE who are coming, I will understand who the representatives are going to be.
Right. Thanks. And one question I had, I was just looking at the recommendation about the group to develop the council submission, and that seems fine to me, but what's your thoughts on how pushy we should be or critical of the lack of funding, real funding for mode change that's available currently? Because I would be asking that our submission reflect our strong frustration in that area and really push and not say things like, we like your plan, but here's a tweak we want. So how about, do you think we should be saying your plan's not good enough right from up front?
I think.
Or, sorry. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be hard for Charlotte to answer that one, but I think we can push as hard as councillors want to go, and I think if we are truly critical of what that funding is and what that availability of resource is, then our submission should be. We should say that in our submission. There is, there's an element of politeness that we kind of normally have in these submissions, where we try to.
So we say, with all due respect, we think
with all due respect, we vehemently disagree with your approach. But I guess that's that balance between trying to protect the relationship at the same time as actually trying to get what we want for the city. But through yourself and Angela and Sarah and that sort of smaller committee, we can make sure that submission reflects council's intention. And if that means going harder, then that's fine.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, another question from Councillor Martin.
Just a question, but obviously I want...
A question.
I just wonder if the Chair would be minded to add to that group to prepare the submission with staff, Mangai Norm, particularly in terms of his broader CV and background as well. I think my own personal view is I think he would bring some really good perspectives, but it's up to, obviously, assuming that Norm's available, I wonder if the Chair would entertain an addition.
Mangai Norm, is that something you would like to be part of, or?
I think certainly keen to participate and contribute from a Mātauranga Māori Waikato Tāne perspective. Yeah, tautoko.
Very happy to make that addition. Cool. And is there anyone who would, we don't have any further questions at the moment, is there anyone who would like to move the recommendation with that addition? No? Was that Councillor Dave? Yes, yep, and a seconder? Yep. Councillor Angela, okay, thank you. And thank you, Charlotte. We'll put it to the vote? Debate. There is no debate from what I can see, unless Mark isn't itching to say anything. So now we'll put it to the vote. All those, we'll just a show of hands, I think, for this. All those in favour, raise your hands, and all those against, carried. Yes? Okay. All right, that brings us to the conclusion of today's meeting. Thank you. Oh, yeah, we were 12:05, 5 minutes out. And we're just going to have a debrief for the Councillor Martin and Mangai Norm after this. So thank you very much. Thank you.